Okay, so the idea of a p-vector is that it's just a vector in processing, like an object in processing that keeps track of two things and has a bunch of vector functions for it. Or maybe three things if we're keeping track of vectors in two space. This whole program, right, seems really redundant because I have stuff in here like LX, LY, VX, VY, AX, AY, right? That really seems like there should be a location that's a tuple, right? An X and a Y thing. There should be a vector for the location. There should be a vector for the velocity. There should be a vector for the acceleration. And then your path should be made of vectors. Right? So instead of keeping track of each one individually, you could keep track of the whole thing. That would be really great, except that I had a hell of a time getting it to work because the vector math is built into the objects, and objects play a little funny with the memory. What was your...
So if I'm remembering correctly, it's been several years, the vector is, like, on a graph, it's a direction. It's a line that goes off infinitely in one direction, right?
No. So that's a ray. A vector is just a line that points from the origin to someplace. So it points from 0, 0 up to LX, comma, LY. Like, that's what I mean by the idea of a vector. And then there's a bunch of math you can do with vectors, which I'm not super worried about whether we know or not. Let me just make a new sketch, and I'll show you kind of how we could get one of these things. Okay? So I just want a p-vector to play with and like a window to look at it in. So I'm going to do setup. Is this right syntax? No. What does setup mean? Void. And then we need a size of a window. We do 600, 400, like classic, right? And then we want to set the background to white because I can't abide other background colors. KK. And then let's see. I just want to do I want to do the simplest thing I can do with a vector to show you how it works. So I'm just going to make a draw method. Oops, draw thing. Oh god. Typing's hard. Okay, and I'm just going to draw an ellipse. And I'm going to put it at x, comma, y, comma, 10, comma, 10. Right? And why is processing yelling at me right now? I haven't defined what x and y are, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make a float x and a float y, and I'm going to set those, I'm going to initialize those to something, I don't know, 100 and 200. Right, just put it someplace, I don't care. So now if I run this, I should get an ellipse. Oh, that's a boring ellipse. I'm going to set my fill to bright green? Maroon. Okay, maroon is some red and some blue, right? Okay, so I want some red, like say 250 red. And what's the next one in the color? It's red, green. Do I want any green? Probably not. And then how much blue do I want?
100.
Sure. Someplace around 100. We'll try that. All right. Maroonish? Victory! Ha!
Because red, green, and blue is just too boring.
Okay, and I want to make... You know what? Shut up about mauve or whatever. Okay. Slightly bigger ellipse. Cool. Good deal. Circle. All right, now I want to make a p-vector. So, first things first, I got to figure out how to make a p-vector. So, I think it's probably p-vector.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. Let's see. So, p-vector, I'm going to call this thing Steve.
What does the p-vector stand for?
Processing.
Processing.
Yeah, so this is a processing vector. And we're going to name him Steve, and he's going to be a new p-vector. Oops. And What do you need to pass a PVector to start with? What's a PVector probably depend on?
2 x's and 2 y's.
Nah, even easier. It's just, it starts at the origin.
Origin and a direction.
Yeah, so it just takes a point, right? Like, where is it pointing at? So I'm just going to feed this thing x and y to start with. You guys good with this? Okay, so now if I want to draw my ellipse at... So let me make a different colored ellipse. I'm going to make this one straight up blue, because you guys seem to discriminate against blue for some reason.
Wait, isn't that supposed to be fill?
Oh, yeah, that does need to be a fill, right? Okay, so I got a fill, and then I need an ellipse. And I want to draw this ellipse. Well, I'm just going to draw this at Steve, just to double check, right? Maybe I should initialize Steve differently. Let me initialize Steve a little differently. Oh, God. Let me put Steve somewhere else, so it'll be obvious that he's somewhere else. And then I want to get my ellipse. Oh. Now this is weird, because what do I need here? Yeah, I need the x part of Steve, right? Okay, so if you want a variable out of an object, you just do the object's name dot the variable you want. So that's going to pull the x variable out of the inside of Steve. So with in my other program where I had gravity running, right? Each of those little balls had a mass. So if I want to pull the mass out of a ball and use it somewhere else, I just type the ball's name dot mass.
So it knows that 150 is the x.
Exactly. The PVector variable really only has 2 pieces of information. Right? If we wrote the class for that, oops. And I'm going to comment this out because it's not actually the class, but if I wrote the class for that, I'd write something like class PVector, and then I'd do something like this, right? And in here, up at the top, there'd be an int x and an int, oh, except they wouldn't be integers, would they? They would be floats, but whatever. And then there'd be like some other stuff, right? So there'd be the 2 variables that the PVector has, and then there'd be like the initializer and all the methods that a PVector has, right? And they'd all just be down in here. And I want to comment all of that out because I'm probably going to play with that a little bit more as we go along, just to kind of demo what's in there.
Kind of a weird question.
Sure.
So if you're declaring float x and float y inside the class, but you've already declared float x and float y in the global space, do those 2 conflict with each other at all?
Yeah, I have a perfect example right here.
Maybe.
I don't want to take up too much.
Yeah, basically, maybe. It's a good idea to be careful of things like that. Yeah, that x variable is a property of that class, so that thing's name isn't x. Actually, it's Steve.x. Does that kind of make sense? So if I want to get the y out, how would I get the y out? Steve.y. And then my ellipse size, I'll just do 50-50 again, right? So now this ellipse should appear at the end of the Steve vector. Right? And to show you what the Steve vector actually looks like in math land, I'd do this. I want to draw a line from the origin out to Steve X and Steve Y. So that line, oh, maybe I should move this. Let's do 300, 150 for illustrative purposes. So this black line, right? That's what I want you to think about the vector Steve, right? And then this blob here on the end is just made by this ellipse command.
So for vectors.
Oh, and I said that was going to be blue, and then I made it green like a dummy.
So for vectors, they always sort of be at 0, 0.
Yeah, so
And then go to the point you.
vectors always start at 0, 0 in processing.
Okay.
And in most of math, that's also true. In physics, things get a little weird, but also you should attempt to make physics work this way as well.
So you could theoretically redefine the origin.
Yeah, we could.
If you needed to.
Yeah, so if we did a translate command in here. Yeah, so story translated stuff, right? So if we did a translate to like, I don't know. I'm just going to push the whole thing 20, 30, right?
Yeah.
Then my Steve vector still ends at 300 over and 150 down from the origin, wherever the origin is. You guys all good with that? Okay. Now, part of my problem in my gravity thing was I wanted to do something to a vector, right? Like, I wanted to have some math done to the Steve vector and make a new vector out of that, right? Okay, so let me make another vector. I'm just going to take my PVector Steve, and I'm going to copy that down here, and I'm going to call this one Stacy. Right? So now, right now, Steve and Stacy are the exact same vector. I don't want to initialize Stacy this way, so I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to let Stacy be a p-vector, right? So right now, it doesn't have anything in it. And then down here, I'm going to take my...
You still need PVector on Stacy?
No, it's okay. I'm going to make it down here. I'm going to force it. So down here, I'm going to say, take Stacy and make Stacy... Really, I want to make Stacy Steve, but different, right? So I'm just going to do Steve dot divide by 2. Yeah, this is the thing.
Wouldn't you also want your line to go from Stacy Y to Stacy Y?
Yep. So let me change this stuff. And now we're going to see what the problem was. So I want to make this whole thing Stacy, right? Oh, and I'm probably going to pop my translate out of here. And I'm going to make this fill with a different color so we can see that it should be different. Now it'll actually be blue. Okay. Cool. What do I expect this to do?
Optimally, it would go half the distance between the origin and Steve.
Yeah, right? Optimally, this would be half as long as the Steve vector is, right? Let me... Oh, yeah, it's keeping doing stuff, right? Because it's in the looping command. You guys all see that? So it's getting looped over a bunch of times. Let me throw a no loop in here. But it wasn't just the... What was the weirdness there? Oh, that's not how you no loop. No loop like that? Okay. This time it worked, right? Okay. Let me do this. So, I want to make it so that when I push the mouse, it does one more loop. You guys with me on that? How do I make it do that?
Mouse press control.
Like, yeah, if mouse press or whatever.
If... Oh, yeah, I don't want an if mouse pressed in here, right? I just want a mouse pressed method, right? So let me just do... Definitely the right spirit, though, right? So just a void mouse pressed takes nothing, and then what do I want it to do? redraw.
I'm not sure that the redraw command actually works.
Oh, it's not playing currently.
It's not complaining about it. Let me try. Wait, what the hell?
Oh, is it so? Did it ran through Steve again at half of previous Steve, and then with Stacy half new Steve, which explains what that mess was earlier.
Yeah, so the earlier mess was this, right? Okay, so what's going on here is that this, when you do math to Steve, right, you're changing the damn thing. Right? Because you're and this is not the major conundrum, just FYI. This should be a relatively obvious thing. This is because you're calling the divide method on Steve. So you're telling Steve, yo, Steve, divide by 2. Stacy, you can call it, like, you can take Steve's information and, like, run with it, right? So Stacy gets the right information, but Steve, he heard that divide by 2 command and did it. Right? So he's divided by 2. He's not going to get undivided by 2. Unless you told him to, right? So you could do this, right? You could do make Stacy equal to Steve divided by 2, and then make Steve equal to Steve, yeah, the opposite of division should be multiplication, right? So I'll do maybe mult is the right command.
Or just Stacy equals Steve and then Stacy equals Stacy divided by 2.
Oh yeah, and you'd love it for that to work, wouldn't you?
It doesn't.
Okay, so
What?
what the hell happened there?
Oh, are Stacy and Steve on the same spot?
Yeah, but why?
Yeah, but why? Like, what the hell?
Because you did math to.
Oh, this is meters.
Yeah, so this is the problem. This is the thing about processing. So if you try the other thing, it'll still dork like this. The reason is, what this line is doing is it's telling the computer to go look in the memory at Steve to figure out what Stacy is. Right? So the computer's not making a new PVector. It's just saying, yo, look at Steve for Stacy. Right? So Stacy's not a new person. She's just like you cocked your head at Steve a little bit. Right? Like, it's looking in the exact same spot. So anything you do to Steve is going to happen to Stacy. Anything you do to Stacy is going to happen to Steve. Because they look at the same spot in the friggin' memory.
So you would have to create variables to store the information and then pass it to Stacy?
Yeah, which amounts to undoing the idea of having a goddamn vector. Right? So I did find a workaround for this. I just didn't implement it because it's not obvious. What you want to do is you want to make Stacy, not Steve divided by 2, but instead you make Stacy a new PVector. So this is going to create a new person. So this is not Steve that you're cocking your head at. This is going to create a new, different person, Stacy. And Stacy's going to be placed at. You could totally do that. I'm just going to do Steve X, comma, Steve Y. And then I'm going to do Stacy dot divide by 2. So why don't I need the Stacy equals Stacy over 2?
Because you're running the divide method on Stacy.
Yeah, because it's going to save that no matter what, right? You're changing that object. You guys see this? Okay, so now if I do this, it will do as expected. And when I click the mouse, nothing's happening because that's what it is. Right? Because every time it loops through, it doesn't change anything. You guys see that? Really, I probably should take this thing here.
Why isn't it running the Stacy dot? Oh, no.
So why isn't it dividing Stacy by 2 every time? Because it's reinitializing Stacy as Steve every time. And Steve's not changing. So if I take this and I put it in the global, so if I put that up here, and really I should just do this.
Oh, that won't work because you haven't defined what's...
Steve's right above it.
Oh, yeah.
Good catch, though. So now this should divide Stacy by 2 every time I press the mouse. So I should get Stacy's Steve over 2, and then when I press again, I should get Stacy divided by 2 again.
Why isn't it drawing over the old Stacy?
If the background setting was set up.
Why isn't it drawing? Oh, yeah.
Right, background's not.
Yeah, because it's erasing. Yeah, because the background isn't erasing every time. So if I wanted the background to erase every time, I'd just take that and plug it down. Cool? Questions on this? So the kick of this, right, is that if you apply a method to an object, it changes that object for good. If you relabel an object with a different name, it doesn't create a new one and then save that information. Like, it's not making copy. It's just saying that thing and that thing are together, right? So it's pointing at the same spot in the memory. Cool, cool?
I just thought of an idea for the lag that you were getting on your continuous rotation. Could you set a limit to the length of an array, and once it reaches that limit, it makes a new array?
Sure. Yeah, that would be a reasonable way to do it. Another reasonable way to do it would be you could, instead of using the append command, you could, like, the append command copies every single time you make an array. Like, every time you call the append, it copies that whole array and then puts one thing in the last empty spot, right? Or, sorry. It copies the whole array one longer and then puts your thing in the last empty spot. You could make the array 10 or 20 units longer and then fill up the empty spots and then only copy it when it got full. That would be another reasonable way to do it. And on that one, you'd probably want to make it 1,000 spaces longer and then fill up each spot and then copy it once and then fill up each of the next 1,000 empty spots. That kind of makes sense? Yeah. It's the append command in processing is super